Hello and welcome to another edition of the Pitt Mailbag Show here from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We're your college writers, Christopher Carter and Abby Schnable. As always, you can find this show on all your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of the daily content that comes out from our writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, as well as the Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast hosted by yours truly, and our Tuesday Pitt Mailbag Show where Abby and I answer your questions on all things Pitt athletics. As always, this show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. When you go to Mike's Beer Bar, you're experiencing the best bar because they have over 500 different available beers. 300 of those beers are from the local Pittsburgh area, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap, and they're always switching new ones in and out. We'll talk more about Mike's Beer Bar later. Abby, we're back here, and everyone wants to talk about the new Pitt basketball commit. It's a lot of excitement here, but how have you been doing, Abby?
Oh, I love watching all the basketball stuff unfold and getting the last piece and watching everyone speculate on who's starting, which we'll talk about today. It's just, I don't like transfer portal season, but when all the pieces have finally come together and I can put on my tinfoil hat, that's when I'm most excited.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of excitement going around. Pitt fans, they're really excited. And it's funny, if you had asked the average Pitt fan and you had told that person that name, they would not have known who Amsal Delalic is, who is the latest Pitt commit. But they will know soon. We've written about it at the Post-Gazette. I'm working on a feature story that will be out very soon. Actually, it should be out by the time that this video publishes. So go check that out at post-gazette.com if you want to learn more about who Amsal Delalic is, the new Pitt commit from Bosnia. But CJ, I felt like CJ's question kind of embodied a lot of Pitt fans' feelings over this week after the commitment. And there's Finley, one of our great guests on the show. CJ asks, I don't know if Amsal Delalic will become a superstar, but I'm excited to see this group Jeff Capel has put together. Do you all think they can comfortably be in the NCAA tournament? CJ, it's tough to always gauge where things are, but I do know they're getting some hype even before the addition of Amsal Delalic, the addition of Corhen and Damian Dunn. Joe Lunardi has put them on his preseason like teams in the tournament. And we all know how Joe Lunardi kind of feels about Pitt when he does his tournament rankings. So I think there is a lot of reason to be hyped and excited for what this current Pitt team and roster is building up to be. What do you think, Abby?
I agree. I mean, there's just a lot of excitement going around this team, especially I think coming off of the heels of such a disappointing end to the season. And we've been talking about on this podcast for weeks that we wanted another sharpshooter. We feel like that would just make this team complete, like as complete as it possibly could be, as stacked as it possibly could be. And they got that. The only thing that's a little nerve-wracking is you're taking a guy who's never really played in America, which can be a little bit of an adjustment, but he does have that in the international experience, which sometimes translates really, really well over here. It's just a hit or miss on whether you can't put your cart before the horse with a guy like this because you don't know what he's capable of. But at the same time, it's very exciting because this is a complete team. There is not one area where I'm like, man, they really don't have someone there. Like, you've got Corhen to be your big guy. You've got Jaland Lowe to run the point. And now you've got Amsal Delalic to really just hone in on sharpshooting, and their defense is always strong. And it makes me excited because on paper, this is such a well-rounded team. And I can't imagine if on paper translates to on the court, I don't see why they couldn't be in the NCAA tournament, especially considering how close they were this past season. Like, I think, if a team like Duquesne doesn't steal a bid, maybe Pitt's in the tournament.
Maybe they would have been in.
But I feel like this as complete as this team is really setting them off on the right foot moving forward.
Absolutely, and we'll get to the starting lineup in a bit. But just to back up for a sec, I want to explain a little bit more about Amsal Delalic if people don't know. Amsal Delalic is the latest Pitt commit. He does not complete the roster because they do have one more scholarship. However, I get the inclination Pitt's going to hold on to that scholarship as an emergency thing that they will use, or if they don't need it, it'll be awarded to one of their walk-ons, kind of like they've done the past few years. But I do think that he completes the roster in the sense that this is going to be a more complete roster than Jeff Capel has had in many years. as long as, major injuries don't happen yet again, because it seems like he always goes through something like that where somebody gets hurt in the preseason. But Amsal Delalic, coming from Bosnia, he'll be 21 years old when the season begins, but he will be a freshman since this is his first time in the U.S. In fact, talking to him, his first time in the U.S. was when his recruitment started, opening up to the United States weeks before he visited Pitt over this past week. So he absolutely has not played in the U.S., but while playing in Bosnia, and by the way, one of his teammates, Jared West, was the leading scorer on his team. Jared West, former guard playing for Louisville in the ACC. So there is some American competition that he's played around. But while in Bosnia last season, he shot a 3-point percentage of 41.5, which was pretty good over 23 games. He was kind of their sharpshooter. He made more 3-pointers than 2-pointers for his team. He's 6'7". He's a good athlete. He's shown the ability to rebound. I think he averaged 4.6 rebounds. Did average like 1.9 assists for his team. He shows the ability to kind of bring all around talent. And talking to him, Abby, he said, "I'm not coming here thinking that I have a starting spot. I'm coming here to earn my chance to play, just like I had to earn it here in Bosnia." And to me, this just adds another, like, if he is even just a sharpshooter, if he's just what Greg Elliott was to the Panthers 2 years ago, that is a lot. He does not need to be the superstar. Like, to CJ's question, he doesn't need to be a superstar, especially this year. Maybe if he develops into one a couple years down the line, that's awesome. But right now, they need him to be the role-playing wing who can hit from deep, keep the offense flowing, play good defense with his 6'7" length. And if he does that, well, Jaland, Lowe, Ishmael, Leggett, Cam, Corhen, and other guys, if the Diaz-Graham twins are coming along, if Papa Conte steps up this year after his injury, if all those things line up, I think Amsal Delalic just plays a role, but that role can still be vital to unlocking the potential of this team.
And I think we've talked about this, but closer to the beginning of when I started coming on the Pitt mailbag with you, was Pitt didn't need a superstar out of their 5-man, out of the transfer portal in general. They really didn't need a superstar. And that's the same thing with this. They just needed a guy to come in and play his role, because you're not really going to fill the shoes of a Blake Henson, of a Bub Carrington,
right?
Who I forgot to mention I chatted with the other day about the NBA stuff. You don't need that out of these guys. You have guys like Jaland, Lowe, and Ish, and even Guillermo to be the stars of this team. But at the same time, it reminds me a lot of the team that went to the NCAA tournament last year, just with the fact that everyone can do something. Everyone can participate. And those are my favorite teams, are when everyone on the court can contribute.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing here, is that they need a diversity of skills on the floor to force teams to honor different things. And I think that's something that they have not ever really had Jeff Capel has not had a guy who's been a true dominant inside presence. They're hoping that Cam Corhen can be a more consistent version of that than they've had since Jeff Capel's been here. And if he can just be that, when you have Jaland, Lowe, and Ishmael Leggett, I think that by itself opens up a whole lot, and that doesn't include all the other forwards who can get in there and the reserve guards that they'll have in here. So with that, let's get to our next question here, and this one comes from Marlon, who emailed us, and he said, "What does Pitt basketball starting lineup look at the start of the season?" Because before we can get to will they make the tournament comfortably or uncomfortably, let's talk about what their lineup looks like. Now, let's go over who the top players are on this team, presumably going into next year. You have returning starters in Jaland Lowe, Ishmael Leggett, and Guillermo Diaz-Graham, Zach Austin. All four of those guys started a lot of games for the team last year, but you also have new transfers, Cam Corhen. You also have Damian Dunn, the guard from Houston, Cam Corhen, the center from Florida State. But then you also have backups that were on the roster last year, but were hurt or didn't play a whole lot. Marlon Burns was redshirted, so he'll be a small 4'6" small forward, 3-4 wing type guy that can try to get his first year of experience. Papa Conte redshirted because he got injured before the season got started. He's a 6'10" forward. He could get some work on the inside. And then there's Jorge Diaz-Graham, Guillermo's twin brother, and he's the 6'11" guy who was injured last year, so he's also a guy who could be in the mix there. But then you also have all the new additions of Brandon Cummings coming out of high school, also Amdi and Ndaye out of Senegal, both of them coming in with this freshman class. So I just named a whole bunch of people here, Abby. I want you to pick through them. Give our listeners and viewers here your starting lineup for Pitt's 2024-2025 season.
And we talked about this before, and I have one different than you, I think.
Okay.
So I'm going to go down mine. So at the 1, I've got Jaland Lowe. Just makes sense that he continues that job. Number 2, Ishmael Leggett. Again, staple. This is where we're going to differ, Chris, is the 3. I think I put Zach Austin in that spot.
Okay.
I'm putting Zach Austin in that spot because of his ability to defend. And and everyone can defend, don't get me wrong, but the way Zach Austin defends is almost explosive, is the way to describe it. And I think that is something that the starting 5 could really use. And so that's why I'm putting him there, just because he does add that kind of X factor. It's subtle, and if you're not paying attention to it, you might miss it. But I think I put Zach Austin there. And then at the 4, I have Guillermo Diaz-Graham. I think that one's just because, again, returning starter, has a ton of experience. I don't put his brother there just because his brother does have a little less experience with not really playing last season. And then my 5 is Cam Corhen. I mean, they brought him in to be their staple center, and I think that's what he's going to do next season.
I'm right with you there on a lot of those. The only difference I have Jaland Lowe as the 1, Ishmael Leggett as the 2. I have Guillermo as the 4 and Cam as the 5. The only difference I have is I do think Amsal Delalic has a legitimate shot to be the 3 on next year's team. But I don't overlook Zach Austin. I think Zach Austin, if he doesn't start, he's going to be coming off the bench like Ishmael Leggett was in the second half of last season, where like he's quickly going to be subbed in to get on the floor, because you're right, his explosiveness, his ability to attack the rim, his defense is there. But I truly think, like we were talking about, this Pitt team needs a sharpshooter. If Amsal Delalic can be the sharpshooter, the Greg Elliott guy that you just keep out there on the perimeter, that teams are like, we cannot leave him alone. If he can be that guy, I think that will mean a lot to Pitt, and they'll want to start him with that, especially if he is able to bring it on the defensive side of the ball. However, I want to remind people that Zach Austin, he didn't shoot the 3 great last year, but he's a guy that when he's gotten into a rhythm, he can be dangerous as a shooter. When he played for High Point, he was able to hit a few threes a game. He shot 33% in the year before he came to Pitt. And while 33% isn't amazing, if he's shooting 6 threes a game and he hits 2 of them, that's another guy that you have to be aware of generally throughout a game. And again, you're not asking him to be the bulk of your 3-point shooting, but he can be part of it. And that's where I think if Zach Austin, he shot less than 30% last year, if he can pick it up to getting back to that 33 or maybe even 35 or 36%, where he hits 2 or 3 a game, I think that can make him much more of a solidified starter for the Panthers. Because to me, offensively, I think the biggest thing is this team needs a shooter to space the floor out, because Ishmael Leggett's going to want to drive. Jaland Lowe's going to want to drive. Cam Corhen's going to want to play the post and work from there. I think Guillermo can be one of those 3-point shooters, but if you just have another guy, because Guillermo can also play underneath, and he's also getting a little bit better attack in the rim, but if you have another guy like Amsal or Zach, if either one of them can hit the 3, that can work out, that can sit on the perimeter, be a consistent threat from there, that can be the thing that makes Pitt's offense so tough to guard.
I think my other note with I have Zach Austin in my starting lineup. I think that changes at the midway point, like you mentioned, like how last year we saw Ish start and then Ish go to the bench. And I think we're going to see that this year at that role. I think they're going to have Zach Austin start just because of the experience factor. And it's going to take some time. You could be the best player overseas and still have to adjust because the differences in the game. And I just feel like that is why, like, Zach Austin's going to start for majority of the season, or for the first half. And then I think they'll switch like they did. Jeff Capel isn't afraid to switch that up if things aren't working. But I do think that makes a good point too as well. When they switch, I think that opens Zach Austin up for a potential sixth man of the year, which we know Jeff Capel is really good at grooming sixth man of the year. The past two in the ACC have been from Pitt, and I could see Zach Austin being that role. But I think to open the season, I think he's starting.
Totally get that entirely. I think that he has that potential. If he's starting, I think that he can be dangerous. If he's come off the bench, I think he can be dangerous. Let's look at it. Let's expand on Marlon's question. And I apologize. We're going to get to another question we have here shortly. But I want to look at this not just from the starting perspective, but Abby, when I look at this, I think either way how you want to set that starting five, I also think there's a ready backup five ready to go for Jeff Capel. So let's go with your starting lineup. Lowe, Leggett, Austin, Guillermo Diaz-Graham, Cam Corhen. That's your starting five there. Then your second five, you can have Brandon Cummings running the one because they're very confident about how he's going to come in this year. And then you could have Damian Dunn, the transfer guard out of Houston. He can run the two, and he can also sub in and take over some ball handling control to slow games down as a veteran. That kind of why they got him. Then if Amsal's not starting, you make him the three, for that second squad, and then you can have Jorge Diaz-Graham there at the four, and then you can have Papa Conte there at the five. Or if Marlon Barnes or Amdi Ndiaye, if one of those two work their way into it, they can get there. But this might end up being the deepest Pitt team that Jeff Capel's had under his tenure. Again, as long as there aren't injuries and other things that take guys away from the team, because they've just, Nike Sabande tearing his ACL like a week before the opener a few years ago, Papa Conte being out last year. The Pitt's just dealt with unfortunate injury after unfortunate injury on top of other issues. I look at that and I think, like, man, if Jeff Capel could just get a break with his players not dealing with breaks, then that Pitt basketball could be on a run here. But now, even if this team that's the thing, as long as it's not like Jaland, Lowe or Ishmael Leggett for the guards, like if Damian Dunn got hurt this year, it wouldn't crush their guards. It would stink. It would not be great. But I think that this might be the most prepared Pitt has been to weather the storm of losing a player for an injury. Not saying it's going to happen, just saying if it does happen, that Jeff Capel's had in his time at Pitt.
Oh, I totally agree. Just the fact that he could – and it really won't take that much a dip in productivity. He could go 5 in, 5 out on a sub. And it really won't change that much because, you mentioned Damian Dunn played for Houston. Granted, he came off the bench for Houston, but any guy that is within the Houston system for as much time as possible, like, I trust him to be a leader in that role. And I think, when you have inexperience in Brandon Cummings and Papa Conte, but at the same time that they're coming in ready to play it as well. Like, I could see Brandon Cummings being just as productive, maybe a little less simply because he might not work his way into a starting spot, but close to the production level of Jaland Lowe's freshman season, just because he has that level and they're hot on him. But then you got, whether it's Amsal or Marlon Barnes or Jorge, your wings are ready to go as well because they do have, Marlon having redshirted this past year. That's experience. Jorge obviously played in the NCAA tournament. And then, it's a little nerve-wracking at the 5 with Papa Conte and Amdi Ndiaye. But, like, the thing is at this point, inexperience, yes, but that doesn't mean a lack of talent. And that's what's crazy to me is this team on paper is so talented, and you find your right mix of vets and newcomers, and there's no reason Jeff Capel can't go 5 in, 5 out. And that's got to be exciting for a fan, because I feel like a lot of fans can get frustrated when you're subbing in people and there is such a drop off in productivity. And I don't see that happening with this team. And that just is exciting because that means you're going to get 40 minutes of good basketball for Pitt. And, we saw a lot of lulls this past season.
Yep.
And a lot of lulls that cost them games. And I think that this team, I don't really think is going to struggle with that, because everyone from the tip off to the end of the bench knows what they're doing and knows their role and will be able to impact on the court somehow.
Absolutely. Either way, I think there's a lot to be excited about with the potential of this Pitt basketball team that Jeff Capel has put together. If they're competitive again, I think it's just going to continue to show Jeff Capel knows what he's doing. And he's brought Pitt back to being a consistent contender in the ACC. So we'll keep all eyes there. But we got to flip to football. We do have a football question before we get out of here. Dominic wanted to ask, who is the new Pitt football commit, Elijah Dotson, and is he the best commit so far? Now, for those who might remember, I did my Friday recruitment report, and I talked about Elijah Dotson there. The point of my recruitment report was who would be the first 4-star commitment to the Pitt to Pat Narduzzi's 2025 class. Now, Elijah Dotson, we work with Rivals.com. They're the group that we kind of can stick consistently with their ratings. Elijah Dotson is a 3-star there. However, Abby, he has a high 3-star. Now, if you don't know what the star system is, typically, 5 stars are the ridiculous superstar kids out of high school that, mostly go to Georgia and Alabama and schools like that. 4 stars are the guys just below that are really premier talents that people think have a lot of upside. And those are also a bit of a higher commodity. But then 3 stars are like the good prospects who aren't looked at in the superstar vein, but are good developmental prospects. And then there's 2 and 1-star guys as well. But, comparing that out, Elijah Dotson is still technically a 3-star. So technically Pitt does not have a 4-star product from Rivals perspective, but on 24/7 Sports, he is a 4-star. And in the ratings of Rivals, there's a point system. And I think it's like if you get to a 5.8, then you officially move into the 4-star status. And Elijah Dotson is a 5.7 and he's the only 5.7 of Pitt's so far 6 commits. And by the way, that's Elijah Dotson out of Michigan, Trevor Summers out of Florida, Mason Heinstall out of Ohio, Bryce Yates out of Virginia, Shep Turk out of Thomas Jefferson here in the Western PA, and Tony Kinsler also out of Florida. But Dotson is an interesting prospect, Abby, because like if you read through Rivals, he's a wide receiver. But you talk to anyone, he could be a wide receiver or a defensive back. But either way, he's at least rated as the highest guy that so far that Pitt has brought in. But I don't think Pitt's done bringing in some of these guys that either are close to being 4 stars or might actually be 4 stars.
I think the thing that stood out to me when looking at Elijah Dotson was the fact that he had so many Power 4 offers. And we say Power 4 now with the Pac-12 dissolving. And when you look at the schools that was considering them, it's not like it's low Power 5 schools.
Agreed.
It is, I wrote down as many as I could, and it was Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, K-State, Louisville, Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, Purdue, Tennessee, Wisconsin. I'm like, just take Michigan and Penn State. Pitt got a guy that was looked at by 2 of the top programs from last season and continue to be 2 of the good programs. And so I think the thing that stands out to me is that this coaching staff is really dedicated to getting some of the top guys that they can. Like you said, you're not really going to see that many 5 stars come to Pitt. Maybe not even that many 4 stars, especially right now with what we're dealing with them being not the greatest the past couple of seasons. But getting a guy like Elijah Dotson, who has the ability to move between wide receiver or safety, who was high on a lot of schools' lists, and he chose to come to Pitt, like that's a good sign to me for the program, because he's a good player that was being looked at by good programs, and he chose Pitt. And I feel like that's the biggest upside to me about his commitment, and that's the biggest thing that I noticed.
Absolutely. And to your point about Elijah Dotson, like, he didn't just get offers from these schools. He was visiting. He visited Penn State twice, Michigan State 3 times, visited Michigan twice. And granted, Michigan State, that's his home state. But I mean, Pittsburgh went into Michigan and stole a close to a 4-star to rivals and a 4-star for 24/7 from the Michigan schools. So, kudos to Pat Narduzzi and the Pitt coaching staff for doing that. And this is also a guy who's ranked in the top 100 in his position in this class. So that says a lot there. So Elijah Dotson, maybe he's the best football commit. The other thing is we don't know who the actual best commits are. There's guys who've been 4 stars who haven't worked out. Elijah Cansey was a 2-star when they picked him up, and then he became a first-round pick and one of the best Pitt players that we've seen, in the past decade or so. So, you never know who guys develop into, but still, recruiting wise, if you consistently hit with those 4-star guys and get more of those guys into your program, you're more likely to get more of them to work out in your program and to develop a more consistent path of success.
Agreed. And I think this is a good sign for Pitt. Like I said, it shows that they're able to still get really good recruits while also being one of the better schools for development. So imagine if Elijah Cansey could come in as low of a seed as he was and become a first-round pick. What's to say a guy like Elijah Dotson can't come in as a high star and leave Pitt's program having made a mark? Like, that's what's exciting to me.
Absolutely. Lots of excitement to go around from Pitt's big football and basketball recruiting weekend. We'll keep you up to date with all of that at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Thank you, Abby, for joining me here on this Pitt Mailbag show from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Thank you for joining both of us. If you tuned into this show, whether it's on your favorite podcasting app or on YouTube, like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get our weekly Pitt Mailbag show, as well as our daily content that comes out from all of our writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'll be back tomorrow with another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast on Wednesday after we get our first look at the Steelers at OTAs. Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. We'll have a lot to talk about then. Tune in for all of that and more here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.